So I want to thank you all for coming out to learn about accessibility. Open your website to everyone. So what's today's premise? Today's goal is to help you understand accessibility from a website point of view. Um, Many people think of this as a afterthought. Um, I mean, there are many different users when you think about it. Those who have some sort of disability, whether it could be physical, cognitive, or sensory. You want to think about these users because they can be affected if your website has a poor user experience. And in their particular case, accessibility is the biggest concern here because many of these people may use some type of assistive technology. They might have some type of physical or cognitive impairment that can prevent them from using it as someone who may not have those impairments. And you want to be aware that your website is inclusive of everyone. So that's the goal of today, is to go through a lot of tips, information, some tricks, explaining some things a little more in detail, and just covering overall what accessibility covers. It's not an exhaustive presentation because accessibility is a very detailed topic. So I will cover as much as I can today, but the goal is to not only do this presentation, but there are others where I will go in more detail about accessibility when it pertains to your website. So without further ado, let's jump right in. If you're new here, welcome. My name is George Woodard. I'm a Marcom website specialist and fractional CMO. I help out nonprofits, government agencies, B2B businesses. I'm what a lot of people consider their go-to web guy for helping out anything web technology or WordPress related. So I've been doing it for over 10 years now. Fun stuff. I get to enjoy playing with technology, solving the headaches that many people have when it comes to marketing and communications with technology. So that's a bit about me. Now, the reason why you are here, website accessibility, is an extremely important topic that everyone should be aware of. Now, the number of users requiring some level of accessibility can amount up to 20% of your visitors. Think about that. Let's say, over a month's time, you're getting 10,000 people a month to your website, and 2,000 of them could be experiencing some type of issues with using your website because it's not accessible. And another thing I want to make people aware of when it comes to accessibility, there's no finish line. That's the best analogy I can think of. There's no finish line to accessibility. Accessibility is incremental changes when there are updates in regulation. Technology, we know, is always evolving. So you want to make sure that you're constantly in the loop or constantly considering those changes and updates that go on when it comes to technology and regulations, staying on top of that. It means when you're doing that, it means you're choosing to be inclusive to your visitors, and you're letting them know that you're welcoming and you're open to them. You're thinking about them. You're inclusive of everyone. Um, Depending on where you're located or what you actually do, accessibility actually can be a legal requirement. I know as of late there has been, believe it or not, a lot of predatory litigation that's been going on with lawyers, people who might have some type of vindictive cause behind it, that have been attacking websites that may not meet a certain level of accessibility. Over the last few years, you've seen a growing number of legal cases that have been popping up in relation to inaccessible websites. And one of the precursors to that, well, not precursors, but one of the ways or one of the statutes that in the US, for example, that a lot of people have been bringing this under is the ADA, the Americans with Disability Act. So they use these type of statutes to try to attack websites that might not have the correct accessibility changes, remediation done. and it's kind of wrong. I mean, honestly, you're being predatory for a reason. I can understand if it's causing issues, but if you're being predatory, I think that's completely wrong. But you want to try to avoid this as much as you can, because lawsuits for these types can be extremely costly. And what I'm going to go over is some of the things that you should consider, and also some tools that you can use. Again, the presentation is recorded. Also, I'll send out a list of some of these tools, as well as an ebook that will provide you some in-depth information that I'll highlight a little bit during this presentation. So, jumping right in, one of the first things we want to cover is navigating with assistive technology. What this covers is three major areas: the visual focus of a website, which is also known as the keyboard focus, the skip links, and screen readers. So, starting with visual focus, is something that is critical for users that rely on keyboards or switch devices to navigate your website. And how this is distinguished is a visible indicator that shows within an interactive element, such as a button or link, and it's currently in focus. And usually, if you've seen this, usually what will happen is that the particular element is outlined or has a specific type of border, maybe a color. So the way you can test this is, if you ever go on your website, maybe it's a form field, or it's a link button that takes you to reading more, the read more link or learn more link. And if you use your tab and you keep pressing it, just pay attention to how the elements cycle through your website, how they change. So when the tab is used, is it highlighting it? Does it show an outline for the link, or outline or border around any type of button or element on your website? Are these elements interactive, showing this? That is the visual focus when it comes to accessibility. Now, in reference to skip links are used by people who navigate using keyboards, screen readers, and other assistive devices. So when you are on your website, you should have a skip link to take your reader to the main content area. Is It's usually, well, not usually, it's helpful to help someone get to a particular piece of content faster. It's usually the first interactive element on a web page, and it usually won't be visible when the page loads initially. It's only visible when it's focused. So again, a tip: when you're on your website and you have a skip link um, on there, test this by pressing the tab key on your home page. The first press should show a skip link, and then you can press enter to take you directly to the content. That's how you determine if you have skip links on your website. And the other assistive technology is screen readers. A screen reader is a tool that reads what's on a user screen, and you may have used this, whether by accident or intention, on smartphones, because that's very, very important. Having that type of accessibility, it will out it'll read out loud whatever's on the screen of your device. Desktop use them, mobile usage. It's mostly used by people who are blind or what's considered partially sighted. And it's also helpful for users who have some type of reading disorder. So, a big myth that many people incur is that you only need to make your website accessible to users of screen readers. While that's not true, supporting screen readers is a very, very important thing you want to consider. Again, going back to what I stated earlier, if you have 10,000 people on your website and 20% of them need some type of assistance, then there's 2,000 people possibly using a screen reader to be able to navigate your website. So you want to consider that. With using the screen readers, one of the things you want to consider, and I'll mention this later, is the alt text. It's the consider alternative text on a website or image. And whenever a screen reader encounters that, it can read out a description or describe exactly what the particular user is looking at or has access. That's something, it's a big thing with using the alt text. Even if you're on social media, I don't know how often you may use LinkedIn, But plug, I'm on LinkedIn. So if you want to look me up, you can get some information on there too. Um, if you use LinkedIn and you post content there, specifically when it comes to images or you upload the carousel, which uses documents like PDF, it requires, not requires, it asks for you to enter alt text for that specific reason. That's an accessibility feature that if you enter that information in, you can explain in detail what the particular viewer is looking at, and it helps them if they're using an assistive device to be able to navigate what you're posting on social media. That's a nice tip to keep in mind. When it comes to your actual website, a tip that you can do: load your website, test it on a smartphone with the screen reader software. For iPhone users, there's a setting called voiceover, and for Android users, you can use what's called talkback. There's one word, talkback or voiceover for iPhone. But load your website on your smartphone, use that software, and see what it does. Is everything clear to a user? I would make note if anything is not clearly explained, or if there's some type of issue with trying to navigate your site and the screen reader being able to read the content that's there. So keep those type of things in mind. Next up is accessible imagery: decorative, simple, and complex. That's the order. Well, not the order, but that's the type of images that you want to have. That you might end up having on your website. For the decorative piece, if an image can easily be removed without impacting the functionality or content on a page, then it's considered decorative. An example of this could be a background image or icon that's displayed above the heading. These images usually have empty alt tags, what I was mentioning earlier, so which will encourage a screen reader to actually skip the image. Now, if this is something that would help them um, connect more with your particular message, whatever it is, or content you have on the page, again, make sure you have that alt text or alternative text, which is the real name for it. You want to have that on there because if it's not, then screen readers will actually skip over it. You want to think of simple. That's the other type of image that you might have on your site. This is an image that adds meaning or context to the content and functionality of your page. Each of these should have clear and concise alt text added to them. Do not, less is more. I'll put it that way. Excuse me. So when you're creating your alt text, make sure it's clear and concise. Just like the written content for your website, same thing. Alt text should be clear and concise. It should clearly describe what the particular image is and concisely explain it in so many words, because you don't want to overload the user with the alt text of what they're trying to look at. And then complex. Another image that you can have on your website is a complex image, a graph, chart, diagram, infographic, whatever it may be. It's typically an image that displays a lot of data or information at one time. Now, it's not feasible to try and do this all or display or describe all of this information using an alt tag. The best option with these type of images is make sure you provide an alt text description of the image just at the minimal level. And then you can use the alt text for the image to direct a screen reader to an alternative description. So there might be an extra section under that particular piece of a particular image that you have. You want to give them a short description there and then take them down to a second piece of content. That way, you're giving them the option to completely review or completely read using the screen reader the content that pertains to that image to help them to understand what it may be. Sometimes you'll find that an image has text on your page. Although this is a lot less common with modern websites because with the advance of font and a lot of hosted fonts, people are not as much. It still happens, but not as much. Are not keeping text within an image. They're using fonts to help convey that instead. And so there are still websites that display text and images rather than text-based content. If you have any images that display text on them, convert them over to text. Just take the same image. Maybe the image, I'm just using this as an example. Maybe the image is a group of people and it might have been like a banner for a event or something, and you have text in it. To help out with it, just take the text out and put it over into written content text right under the image. Add a alt tag to that specific image to have the reader to go down and read the details or information about the event. Not only will you get bonus points for having an accessible website for doing that, but also you get bonus points on the speed factor of your website, because then you're removing less load off of your server, your website server, to be able to load an image that has less amount of data inside the image itself. So that's something to think about. A tip there: go to each page on your website, review your images, decide which category that these images fall under, whether it's decorative, simple, or complex, and then review any alt text and ensure all your images have the appropriate text. It can sound kind of tedious, it can sound time consuming, but I promise you, once you start getting into the kind of the swing of it, it becomes kind of second nature. For example, with myself, my preferred CMS of choice is WordPress, of course. So with using WordPress, when you're uploading images to it, you do have the option of adding alt text to that. Um, just make it a habit. Whenever you're uploading images, add alt text directly to it. Once you've done it, then you don't have to worry about it later on. So if you're going through an accessibility audit, or someone who is actually using your website, they would have that capability already there. For example, one of my clients is a local government agency. I'm based in Houston, Texas, and I provide webmaster services for them. I make sure their website is online 24/7, because they have state compliance laws for a lot of meetings and documents, etc. And recently, as of about 2 months ago, we had a gentleman actually come to one of their board meetings, and that was a concern for him. Excuse me. He is partially blind, so sometimes he has to use assistive devices to use the internet, and that was a very interesting conversation I had with him. But he gave me some tips to help out with improving the accessibility, and one of them was alt text. There were a few of them that were missing. So again, make it a habit when you're uploading images to your website, whatever CMS that you're using. Um, Make sure you're adding the alt text as you're uploading it, because then you are keeping that accessibility optimization in mind. And then that's something you don't have to worry about later on having to go back and redo, because sometimes it can be tedious. So moving on, the next point of consideration is fonts and colors. So making a website accessible focuses more on users with disabilities, but having accessible and legible fonts is important to everyone. I mean, it's just kind of common sense, something that's easy to read. You want to make sure it's easy to see and it's very easy to understand. For example, just looking at this presentation slide, I have dark colors on a light background. Very easy to read. The font is not one of those, I call them crazy fonts, crazy fonts where it looks like it's some cartoonish style signature or something like that. Very simple, very easy to read, very easy to understand. That's the same process you want to go about when it comes to your website. You want font that is very easy to read, very easy to understand. And then when it comes down to color choices for your branding, you want to make sure that it's easy to see. I think we've all experienced it at least once, where you're looking at text on a website or even on a marketing brochure, flyer, what have you, where the contrast between maybe the background and the text is terrible. So it, it causes you to strain your eyes so much to be able to read what you're trying to read. Um, there's so many different ones that are, when it comes down to fonts, so many different ones that are up for consideration, but you want to avoid anything that's a little too intricate and a little too decorative. While it may looks nice, but it's going to be hard for someone who has some type of impairment trying to use your website. So always think about that. Now, there's a governing body called WCAG, and they provide kind of a global accessibility guidelines, if you're not familiar with that. And they are the ones who set the standards for a lot of digital accessibility. And what are their recommendations is making sure that users can zoom in to make text 200% larger on your website. And a well chosen font will actually accommodate this. So if you're using, one of the most overused fonts, Arial or Times New Roman, that's standard font, industry standard. We use it in word processing documents everywhere. Using those types of fonts can easily accommodate people because they're able to increase and decrease the text size to whatever you want to be. The branding part of it, when it comes to colors, is totally up to you. But again, you want to make sure it's easy to see and easy to understand. Um, a tip there when it comes to the fonts: review the fonts you're using on your own website. Does everything look clear? Is it easy to understand? And be considerate of others who might have some type of visual impairment and cannot legibly read. If you know of someone who may have some type of visual impairment or may use an assistive device, that's the best. I mean, it's the best feedback that you can get. Hey, could you check out XYZ page for me? I'm starting to become more aware of accessibility when it comes to our browsing experience. So I want, someone who may use these type of steps to access a website. Could you check it out? Give me some feedback. Tell me what it is. And they can be able to give that to you. They can look at all the text on your website, different sizes of text on your website, make sure it's easy to read, make sure it's legible. Would it be better if it's larger? Would it be better if it's smaller? Maybe you need to adjust some of the font or change your font style because, just in standard English, a lot of times when it comes to typing, the capital I versus the lowercase l. So that can be hard to distinguish. So just think about those things. When it comes down to the colors, specifically, WCAG 2.1 defines specific color contrast ratios for there's different levels of compliance, and the current and more easily obtained level is level AA. And based on that level, the color contrast needs to be 4.5 to 1 for text at a normal size. And for larger text, which is 18 point or bold text at 14 point or higher, the contrast ratio needs to be 3 to 1. So colors should not be the only visual indicator, or the meaning of your website. Not everyone perceives the color in the same way. So, for example, colorblind users, they'll see colors on your website differently. That's why WCAG set those color contrast ratios, because there's these different type of color blindness or different levels of color blindness. And you want to make sure that you're adjusting the colors on your website or have a way to adjust the colors on your website to consider. One of the most common types of color blindness is red-green. So if you feature any success, good, or warning bad messages, or the buttons like the green, red, you want to consider showing more than just green or red colors for these, adding maybe an icon, additional context either before or after the button will help a user perceive this message easily. Because if they have this type of color blindness, it will be hard for them to understand the purpose of the button, link, etc., or text if they are not able to have good perception of that color change. And again, there's tools for this. I'll send those out to you, but it'll help you out with testing the colors and the contrast checkers on your website. And then moving on is caption, excuse me, and transcripts. So with this day and age, video is an extremely popular medium. And actually, YouTube is one of the most visited websites in the world. So around 5 billion videos are watched every day. So if you're using videos on your website, whether it's through YouTube, you're embedding videos from YouTube, you're using Vimeo, whatever it may be, You need to take action to provide an accessible way for your visitors to enjoy your content. I'll be completely honest. There are some videos that I'm now, doing updates to provide captions to them, and this is one of the things that you want to provide is captions to your content. Every video with audio content that you feature on your website should have a caption. In some parts of the world, captions may be referred to as subtitles. They're interchangeable, but the same thing. But it's important to have them there because captions provide content for someone who may be deaf or hard of hearing. They help them understand the content of the video that they're watching, and through a text version of the speech, they can grasp the context of the presentation that you're providing. There are different kinds of captions, and then there's also things for called transcripts, and you have the two types that are listed here, the basic and descriptive. So to give you an idea of what the difference between the two are, the basic transcript is just a way of showing speech and non-speech audio information to help a user understand the content that's being presented in the video. Basic transcripts help deaf, hard of hearing, and users who have difficulty processing auditory information. It would help them to be able to grasp the content that you're providing in the video. Now, the descriptive transcripts, these show speech and non-speech audio info, as well as descriptive of the visual information in the video. Descriptive transcripts provide video content to users who are both deaf and blind. They're also used by users who process text better than audio or visual information. So you would need to understand and use these types of transcripts on your website in order to meet your desired 2.1 level in WCAG, or the level 2A. And using these type of transcripts ensure that your visitors or your users, your audience, can better understand what's going on with the type of videos. An example where you can use a transcript on your website is if you have a podcast. For each individual episode page, provide a transcript of the episode. That'll help the listener understand what's going on. Or if they are deaf or extremely hard of hearing, then having that transcript will help them gain the insight that you provided in that podcast episode. And if it's pre-recorded audio, that transcript that you provide would ensure that you meet the WCAG level A requirement, which is the first level. Now, moving on, and this is something that is very, very, very has been presented a lot and talked about a lot when it comes to accessibility, and that's overlays. So if you've ever gone to a website and it has, usually what they look like is an icon of the handicap logo in the bottom right hand corner. It's a tool usually created through AI, artificial intelligence, but it's an automated tool to help, supposed to help visitors who possess some type of auditory issue, maybe deaf, hard of hearing, visual impairment. The tool is supposed to adjust the website to help these users navigate it a lot easier. Do not use them. And I'm saying that as both a consultant and as a current previous user. I say that because I do have, as I've grown in this space, I've started to understand and learn more about accessibility. I've found out that the overlays are not great to have on your website. So I'm in the process of actually remediating all of my client sites to remove the overlay. These types of technology promise a one-click solution to help your website become accessible. While this sounds very ideal, and it will not be accessible if you're using these types of tools. It'll actually do the complete opposite. It'll cause more issues of accessibility on your website than anything. One of the most recent findings is that some of these overlays will actually cause privacy issues. So um, you might encounter, some data can be unencrypted unintentionally. But there's more and more research as the time is going by that a lot of these overlays are not a good form of accessibility. In 2021, WebAIM, they're a very popular group when it comes to accessibility. They conducted a survey amongst practitioners, and one of the questions they asked was, "How would you rate the effectiveness of web accessibility overlays, plugins, or widgets that automate the accessibility changes in web pages?" And a direct quote, I'm going to read this verbatim, a direct quote from this survey was, "A strong majority, 67%, of respondents rate these tools as not at all or not very effective. Respondents with disabilities were even less favorable, with 72% rating them not at all or not very effective, and only 2.4% rating them as very effective." So what does that tell you? Yes, Brad. Yeah, it's more and more research is coming out. There's a link again. I'm gonna send that in the list of tools, but there's a website called Overlay Fact Sheet. It was created by Carl Groves. He's an accessibility expert, but there are many people, some who I consider good colleagues of mine, that are extremely knowledgeable and experts in accessibility that have contributed to this database of information. But they will 100% tell you, do not use accessibility overlays. They're not worth your time. They can actually break a lot of the accessibility um, changes that these things are trying to do on the website. Again, and if you've probably seen many of these, Userway, Audio Eye, and Accessibility. There are plenty others that are out there, but these are usually the top three contenders that most people are aware of. If you're considering using an overlay, make sure you're aware of the limitations and the impact of these tools. Um, I cannot remember the exact number, but I remember that I was having a conversation with one of my colleagues, and she was telling me, kind of coaching me through about how the overlays will, break the accessibility of a website and things. And if you choose to use them, choose to use them, keep in mind that it could solve at best maybe 20% of the issues, accessibility issues that you have on your website. So you want to be cognizant of that if you're going to use those type of tools. Um, and to be completely honest, there isn't a one-click solution. Again, when I was in the beginning of my career studying about accessibility, you find out about these tools and you're like, all right, cool, somebody came up with a solution for it. And then as you start growing in knowledge, you become better at what you do. You start understanding there actually isn't a one-click solution. Accessibility is not a one and done situation. Like I said earlier, accessibility and SEO actually go hand in hand, but they're very similar when in relation to how often you should consider it. It's not a set it and forget it. It's something that you have to consider day by day, change by change. Anytime there are new updates coming out, again, with me being a WordPress developer, there's always software updates coming out. So you want to always check and make sure that these updates are not breaking anything in that case. When it comes to programming languages, the foundation of the web is HTML, CSS. When there are updates in those languages, you want to consider that too. Even when you're updating your website, whether it's for branding reasons or content reasons, that's another thing you want to think about. But when you're posting and updating your content, you also want to consider that too. So accessibility is not just a one-stop shop. It's something you have to consider going on and on and on with doing. And using an overlay won't get you there. So just try to, as best you can, remove them if you do have them. Prioritize, the accessibility of your current website, making sure you're following good guidelines. Again, like I said, in that list of tools, I'll send you the websites that you can go. There's a lot of scanners that can tell you exactly what you need to update on your site. And and it's correlated to the guidelines from WCAG, so you'll know exactly the reason. I mean, exactly what you need to change and why it helps accessibility on your website. But again, it's a priority. The internet is far behind when it comes to accessibility. There's a lot of great user experiences when it comes to visual elements, but those will hinder someone who might have some type of disability being able to use your guide. There's a lot of different steps. And again, this is not the final presentation about accessibility I give. There's going to be more. So there's a lot of information to cover. There's a lot of things that you have to consider. One of the best things I would say, audit your information, audit your site, whether you have a developer on retainer or, you're able to do it yourself. Always audit, always check, make sure that you're hitting those guidelines. And don't ever, again, like I said, it's not a finish line. So don't ever think you'll hit 100% compliance. It's not possible because it's so much you have to take into consideration when you're doing accessibility. It's next to impossible for someone to be 100% compliant. But to shoot for as best you can to get it all checked off, that's really that you can ask for. When you're doing your alt text, you're doing your contrasting. Honestly, that's hitting a lot of it right there. And if you're taking inventory of all these things, just make sure you're prioritizing them. Make sure you're keeping them top of mind. Make sure you're setting even a schedule of every Tuesday, every 2 weeks, you're doing accessibility check of your website. So just always prioritize those type of things. Again, I wish there was, but there's not a one-click solution for accessibility. But doing a lot of the steps necessary mentioned earlier will help get you to being as compliant as you can be. So beautiful, beautiful amount of information, great amount of information. Now we're at the best part, the Q&A. So I know some people have dropped a few questions in here. Brad mentioned, how does one determine the color contrast ratio? Yes, there is a couple of tools. Again, I'll send out that list. It'll be a Google sheet, but it'll have a tool. I'll put the tool name, what it does, and the link to it, so you can be able to go and check. But it'll on that site. It'll show you what the specific contrast ratio should be, and if whatever web page you're scanning hits it. So that'll help you out. Corin, apologize if I'm saying that wrong. What examples specifically were you referring to? If you can write that in for me. And let's see. Brad says, in relation to video captions, sounds like the caption text needs to be separate from the video and not embedded in the video image itself in a way that cannot be read. Actually, captions are a part of the video. So that in that case, when it comes to captions, that's usually for someone that may be deaf or hard of hearing, or who have some type of processing, cognitive disability. So adding the captions directly into the video would allow them to read it, because as a lot of times captions do kind of lag a little bit, which is okay. And you read those captions, allow them to process the information that you're presenting instead of having to go at the pace of the actual presenter. So you can have them on the video. Transcripts are what you're referring, or could be what you're referring to, is that having them separate. So let's say you have a video about whatever, and then under the video on the same page, you would have the transcript. So that will be more detailed. So that way they can read through using a screen reader to be able to understand the context of the video that you're presenting. So hope that helps. You were talking about buttons and contrast ratios. No, I should have put that into the presentation. I'm glad you said that. I did not, but I will add some of that onto the tools as an example. On some of those websites, they provide those type of examples, so you wouldn't have to hunt and peck for it. But I'll have some specific links to show you what that is referring to. Good question, though. Any other questions? Anything else? No problem. No problem. Always glad to help. Yes. So captions, they are a separate text file. And depending on how you're formatting the video, um, I know your focus is WP. Any differences we should be aware of with plain HTML based websites? No, the issues are pretty much the same. So because WordPress uses PHP to generate an HTML based website. So when you're inspecting it from the front end, you're going to see the HTML code. You're not going to see the PHP. So what happens there when it comes to WordPress versus, we'll just say Webflow, because I know that's a HTML, that's a static system. It's the same. Now, how much you can access the code to be able to make those changes is where you run into problems. That's why I'm so pro 100% open source technology. WordPress, WordPress, Drupal, Joomla, any of those open source CMSs. That's why I'm 100% uh, for those, because you have 100% access and ownership of your website. Now, I know with something like Webflow, you can export it into HTML, then you have full access to be able to change what you need to change. But some systems don't have that. A lot of the proprietary CMSs don't have open availability to access the behind the scenes code to be able to make those changes. So you want to consider that. Whatever system that you're using, make sure you have full access to the code in the event if there's some type of update, change, remediation, fix, whatever that you need to make that requires you to code it. If you are capable and willing to do it, um, that you have access to be able to do that. Because I would hate for anybody to, get hit with some type of litigation because they were not able to access a part of their website to be able to make those changes. So, as far as the differences between them, that's really it. Just making sure or ensuring you have access to be able to jump in the code and make those changes if it's necessary. But outside of that, they all output HTML on the front end. It's just only the back end when you're digging into the back end of the system is where the differences lie. So, let's see. I'm a little tiny guy on the internet. I will be shocked to get 1,000 people on my site in a year. I don't have personal bandwidth. I have to make sure. Okay, so kind of accessibility on a budget. There you go. Really, the details in the presentation, again, I'll send all this out so you would have it to be able to go through, use a lot of the tools. There are a lot of these tools are, well, actually, all of those tools are free. So you don't have to pay for anything to do it. But just really some of the minimal things that you could do, making sure your text is legible. Stick with simple text, something like Roboto, Arial, Times New Roman, the things that we all use and read every day. Stick to simple text. Make sure that the contrast of the text to the background that it's sitting on is not blinding the person or not, illegible. You can't read it. So that's something simple. When it comes down to your images, just add your alt caption. Like I said, with WordPress, you can do that with other CMSs. Some you might have to install additional modules to be able to do it, but just adding the alt text to your images when you're uploading, whether it's in the code or in the media library of the system that you're using, those type of things, making sure your branding, there's not a lot of clashing going on. Keep it simple, keep it clean. um if you are using your videos, I know captioning a video can be extremely expensive depending on how you do that. Create the transcript. If you are knowing exactly what you're saying, it's a lot of times when you do presentations, you have your outline, expand on the outline and make that a transcript. If you're pre-recording the video, develop the transcript as you go. Is another way. Really, those small things can help you with improving the accessibility of your website. And again, accessibility is not a 100% finished idea. There's always updates that you have to make. But if you do some of those minimal things, that should get you at least started on a path of being as compliant as you need to be, and kind of avoid a lot of those the predatory litigation. Honestly, in my observation of what's going on when it comes to litigation, many of the people are targeting the high profile sites. Now, I'm not saying that smaller sites are not um, vulnerable to it, because I have read cases where that has happened or seen some instances where that's happened. But usually, when it comes to some smaller sites, many times the visitor may know someone within the company that they can contact and give you a heads up, like, "Hey, we tried to access, XYZ, and we can't because of," and they'll give you the explanation. Like in the case of one of my clients, they had a guy come to the board meeting, and he gave us, some heads up, and I said, "Hey," and I was thoroughly interested in wanting to talk to him directly, because that's helpful. Knowing someone who might have some type of impairment can help you do that. That's another thing. There are many people online. If you want to find them through LinkedIn, there are accessibility champions that have some type of impairment, that would actually offer, maybe just a couple hours, hour or two, that will actually help you with your accessibility. They can give you some pointers if they're using an assistance device. But as far as the minimal things, making sure your contrast is good, make sure your text is legible, and legibility of text, not only just the right kind of font, excuse me, but make sure it's big enough as well. And then make sure your branding, there's not any clashing of colors there. So that's a lot of the minimal stuff that you can use on the first pass. One more, captioning a video. I've heard back in the day that you could potentially upload it as unlisted to YouTube. I think I would at least try to create a caption on it. Yes, I know. I haven't used that in a while, but I know they have automated captions, a feature you can turn on, like closed captioning, with TV. And yes, you can create a video, upload it to YouTube, and make it unlisted so you can develop your caption and transcript. That's actually something I'm going to be doing here in the next couple months, because I have to go through and do some edits on my videos as well. But yes, you can do it unlisted, create your captions, transcript, upload, make your changes, and then put it back public. So yes, that's something you can do. Um, you could, I think the caption feature that YouTube provides is like an automated thing. So it would be a setting you could turn on. And I have never done it because I want to be able to control my captions. I didn't want to go through the problem of using that and then it displays inaccurate information. So that's just me. But if you choose to use it, I don't see a problem in using it. That's just only my personal preference. So good questions, all good stuff. I love this group because you guys always have some good questions. Anything else? I think we might have space for one more. All right. I think that is going to. Okay, so that's good information to know. YouTube caption generation is speech to text AI, but you can edit the text manually. So it's good to know. Good to know. All righty. Well, it's been a pleasure as always. I appreciate everyone for tuning in today. Again, I will follow up with you with some additional information about not AI, accessibility. I've been in AI conversations so much in the past couple weeks, so that's all my brain has been wrapped around. I appreciate you joining us today. Again, I'll send out some additional resources about accessibility. It's going to have some tools. I have some additional emails that have more information to help you think a little more about what you need to do. And again, if you have any questions, feel free to reply to any of those emails, or here's a link to my website. That's elsqrd.com. And you can go to contact us and send me a message. But again, I appreciate you for tuning in today. Hope you have a great rest of your day. Take care.